democracy is alive in our country, it is because we, the people of India. After emergency, the courts now begin to play a very important, distinct, unique role in the history of the world. Before we talk of Viksit Bharat, we would have seen some other Bharat, where all these issues would have been answered. Bring them alive today, those 300 members. How would they have looked at India today? They would have said, India has then the ability to make people reach courts.
The journey of about 4 decades of Sri R. Venkataramani, from a dedicated legal practitioner to the country's highest law officer, reflects an unwavering commitment to justice. In the courtroom, Sri Venkataramani has played a pivotal role in cases that have shaped India's legal landscape. In abrogation of 370 case, he convinced judges to hold that there was no need for consent from the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly, as the constitution had already contemplated changes through executive action. Venkataramani also pointed out that the parliamentary resolution that backed the abrogation of Article 370 had been passed by both houses of parliament, reflecting the democratic will of the people of India.
Very good afternoon to all of you. I would like to first of all congratulate the Bharat Literature Festival and its extraordinary leadership and many individuals who have come together to put this program. We are truly fortunate that we have one of India's leading jurists, Dr. R. Venkataramani, who is serving as Attorney General for India, a senior advocate, Supreme Court of India, and somebody who has seen the evolution of not just the law, but the institutions that the law has governed in the last 75 years. Ladies and gentlemen, we are having this program at a very historic juncture in the context of India's evolution, both as a constitutional democracy and also as a republic. Literally a few months ago, on 26 November 1949 originally, but we celebrated the 75th anniversary on 26 November 2024, marking the adoption of the Constitution of India. On 26 January, we of course celebrated the Republic Day, where the Constitution of India came into force. So today's theme and panel is essentially looking at the 75-year journey of the Supreme Court of India, and the theme is about the Supreme Court of India being a pillar of justice and mirror of aspirations. The organizers have chosen a very inspiring theme, looking at how the future of law will shape the understanding and appreciation of the Constitution. Thank you so much, sir, for agreeing to have this extraordinary opportunity for all of us to hear your views. Sir, in many ways, let me begin by asking you to reflect a bit on the Constitution moment that we had in the year 1949. We were recovering from almost 200 years of colonialism. We were also in the sort of aftermath, or as the constitutional framers sat together framing the constitution, there was widespread violence in the form of partition. We also were a very poor country. The life expectancy at that time was approximately 32. There was widespread poverty. There was hunger. There was malnutrition. There was so much of challenges in the entire social, economic, and developmental structure. At that time, these extraordinary 300 individuals were framing the Constitution. How would you reflect on that moment, sir?
I think firstly it's important that this event like this is happening in the midst of a milling crowd of book lovers.
Yes.
And then it's a fact that in the midst of a world book fair, that people would like to know, to expand their knowledge and be part of the world of knowledge. It's an important place where we locate our Indian Constitution.
Yes.
I think that's how I would like to begin to answer your question. So the thirst of these 300 and odd people was not merely the individual thirst of taking India to a world of plenty, a world of freedom, a world of innovation, a world of togetherness. So in 1947, I think it's important that when scholars talk about India's constitution making and what happened in the rest of the world. So the struggles which we went through in the making of the constitution truly reflected not only the problems we have already faced, but the problems we are likely to face. So look at the lives of each and every one of those people who are in the Constituent Assembly. They came from different walks of life. As we discussed sometime earlier, some of them occupied not very high positions in life, but they came as elected members of the Constituent Assembly. I consider the history of the Indian Constituent Assembly as something very unique. If you look at constitution which came post 1948 after the World War II, many were written by few unelected people sitting in, what called the elite chambers. But if you look at the assembly debate, I wish the debates went on for about more than 3 years are published in popular language, where each and every member took pains to reflect their understanding and the need to have a beautiful India built. And therefore, I think this is an important space that we are assembled here today and to talk about the Indian Constitution. Well, if you probably bring them alive today, those 300 members, how would they have looked at India today? They would have said, they would have done this. They would have definitely done this.
Thank you so much for that. I think it was so nice that you reflected on their vision and their contribution. Now, one of the remarkable things that they did in our constitution was that they established the framework of the court. And this was a very important call that India took, because we drew inspiration from the Westminster form of government. We've decided on a parliamentary form of democracy, but we also decided that it is not the way we will function, in the sense that in India it will not just be the parliament being the supreme organization, but it will be the constitution that will be supreme, in the sense that they empowered the institution, which is the Supreme Court of India and other courts. How would you reflect on that vision of the framers when they established the court and empowered it?
Probably I look towards not a very distant future when my cook and my driver would engage me in a constitutional discourse. And how would that be? I think a constitution is not merely a distant document. It's something part of how we build our nation. If you say democracy, constitution, rule of law, they're all so tied up together as one beautiful called basket oven. So if parliamentary democracy, Westminster form of government and all that, if you see today, we have transcended them all far, far beyond our imagination from 1947. We have created our own destinies. We have created our own paths. We have also enshrined through constitutional dialogue between parliament, court and the people of India a new path where probably the rest of the world would like to borrow on from as many aspects as possible. Therefore, I think the Westminster form of government was only a little leaf from a history which we have taken and picked up. Then now the leaf has become a banyan tree in our hands. So I would like to look at it like that. And I don't think it is merely a contribution only by one institution. Each institution has played an important role. If you go back in point of time from 1950, who went to the high courts and Supreme Court? Very ordinary people of this country. Like today, very ordinary people of this country go to high courts and Supreme Court for assertion of their rights. I think the seeds were sown as earlier than 1950. Therefore, somebody calls it, we are a republic of writs. That is a republic of orders issued by courts. That's truly speaking correct version. So I think if somebody were to write a history from 1947 to 2025, they will definitely say that I'm not speaking to any sense of excessive nationalist jingoism. No. I speak truly as an objective scholar of Indian constitutional history, that our constitutional history will be written very, very differently from Probably even somebody can write about the US constitutional history.
Thank you so much, sir, for that. I think what you said is so critical because the Constitution starts with the words, we the people. And the preamble of the Constitution, which lays the foundation for the Constitution, recognizes the role of the people. And that's something which the framers were mindful because we decided on universal adult franchise early on. We ensured that every adult Indian should have the right to vote, including women. For example, in Europe, in Switzerland, they were not given the right to vote till the 1950s. So the progressive vision and aspiration of the Constitution was reflected in the provisions and then in the institution. But my question to you is that, how do you see the early years of the Supreme Court when it was established just after the implementation or the Constitution of India coming into force? I ask this question also being mindful of the fact that we were historically dealing with a lot of issues relating to discrimination, inequalities, and even the idea of the rule of law. So there was a lot of, let's say, aspirations and expectations from the people of India from the court. How did the court respond to it in the early years?
We thought we were charting to ourselves a path which will be different from the other parts of the world. Of course, the Constitution of India has borrowed some principles from building societies on an equal basis, from socialist ideas, for instance. Therefore, in the early part of a republic, it is the government which was more concerned about building the nation through constitution. So we had many experiments of law relating to property reorganization, redistribution, so on and so forth. So you'll find the state very intensely occupied in that. But as soon as it's found that the state was able to get its way through, and in the early stages you find, while the court was initially resisting, Supreme Court taught property rights. But as we soon move into the 1960s and 70s, we find that the state is able to assert itself that the values of the Constitution towards moving to an equal society, an egalitarian society, become so established that the perspective of the court began to slowly change. Then you find a different era when the state was found to be the violator of fundamental rights. So you'll find people reaching out to the court and say, here is my right to freedom of speech and expression. Here is my right to all kinds of rights under the Constitution. So it's the second stage when people begin to assert that they saw the state is not their friend, could be their opponent. So we see a very important transition. You come to the next stage after emergency, the courts now begin to play a very important, distinct, unique role in the history of the world. Namely, a collaborative, deliberative institution where court will say, I am going to be the mediator between the state and the citizen in a unique way. So if you see this movement or a transition, it is probably unlike comparable to any other part of the world. England did not experience it, not even many European countries. It's very different in USA. So but now we live in probably in a fourth stage when the entrenchment of principles, namely people's right to challenge any wrong action of the state, which may infringe their right, and the ability of the courts to say that I'm going to be what called a deliberator between the state and the citizen. And you find a lot of new ideas. But that's why I think we the people of India in the preamble is very important. So I suppose ultimately if democracy is alive in our country, it is because we the people of India.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for those really thoughtful remarks. For all of you who are watching this, I'm going to come back to you. Think about some questions that you will ask the Attorney General. We will definitely have some time to have an interactive session. So I'm sure as he speaks and reflects on these ideas, you can think about the questions as well when we come back. So the second thing I wanted to ask you was that, there has been a huge discussion and debate surrounding the role of the courts itself. At various points of time in our 75-year history, we've had other wings of the government, including the parliament, which is the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, sort of constantly trying to occupy its own space and in many ways asserting its own roles and responsibilities. My question to you is that there were times when the executive had failed significantly, and it was the court which had to literally, uphold the rights and freedoms. In fact, even the court at time failed as well. The classic time which I am talking about is the ADM Jabalpur case, the emergency time when no less than the Supreme Court of India, through its judgment, said that liberty itself is the gift of law and can be taken away by it. The lone dissent, Justice H.R. Khanna, was the one who gave hope, and later, of course, the court transformed itself. So my question to you is that how important it is for us to ensure that we have strong and independent institutions so that they can constantly safeguard the rights and freedoms of people.
I think this is a non-negotiable issue. If it's said for a nation to be together, while individuals can make the voice for the nation, but I think it has to be channelized. And this channelization comes one through elections, and after elections there are further channels required. So the court is the most important channel thereafter. You go to any part of the world, you will find people writing about the blunders and the mistakes that the governments make. And people now begin to talk about democracies can fail. So the importance of institution building, not only courts, but executive and even the parliament. So if somebody were to say, I would still appeal to parliamentarians that we make our parliament more appealing and closer to the people, I would vote for it. We still need to do a lot of things to make it parliament coming closer to the people, not only through the process of election, but being more and more attentive in a studied, scholarly way, reflect on unbiased way to make the wishes of the people more real. But then a mere parliament may not make things good. So we talk about ADM Jabalpur and thereafter. You look at the experiments taking place all over, so let's say the Asian countries, with new democracies. You find they have a lot of challenges. Their ability to strengthen their final court or the apex court is being met with a lot of issues. Historians are talking about it. But fortunately for us, post-emergency, which both the people of India learned and the parliamentarians learned, political parties have learned, and executives have learned, that it now become like axiomatic that the courts will never be any way impacted in their authority and role to ensure to be the guardians of the people's rights. So I think we've reached that it's almost beyond a plateau. So I don't think there's going to be an issue for us at all. There can be no more of emergencies revisited in our country. And that's made more possible because Supreme Court has handed over to us for the people of India to reflect in their ordinary conversation. Our newspapers virtually report every day at what the Supreme Court and High Courts are doing. So we are always on a run to be accountable to the people. And that's the importance of courts being what called in foreign language, the sentinel or the qui, that is, you are the watchman for the rest of the country.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I'm going to ask some difficult questions for you, because we have an amazing group of individuals who are book lovers who are here. I'm sure some of these questions might be in their minds, even though they may or may not be lawyers and judges. One is that for those individuals who are looking the court from outside, they are also deeply concerned about the fact that we have 50 million cases or 5 crore cases pending in Indian courts across the country. The Supreme Court has lesser number of pendency, but when you go down the ladder, there are large number of cases pending. The typical litigant is in a situation where access to justice has become a challenge because of the number of years and the associated cost involved in ultimately getting justice. I know for sure both the government and the Supreme Court itself has been working hard and trying to take a lot of efforts to address this matter. At your vantage position as Attorney General, what do you think we should be doing with a view to radically transforming the situation? Because COVID has brought us to an even greater crisis. Pre-COVID, we had 30 million cases pending, and post-COVID, it's 50 million cases pending. How do we deal with this situation?
My Chancellor, you know that you also been engaged in this conversation with lots of people. And as an institution, I think it's important that you keep asking this question. I wish a country like ours, with a huge population, with aspirations, exploring opportunities for a good life on an equal basis, and with values of equality, I wish I have a magic wand to answer this question. But there are so many theories. I tell you, for the past 25 years or so, each and every government which has come to power at the center and at the state have been trying to find answers to this question. But sometimes we try to avoid giving answer to this question by saying some kind of a rhetoric, say, it's because of the trust people place on courts that there is a huge volume of litigation. I think that's true.
Correct.
But then to place your head and close your eyes to it, I think is not going to be good enough. And as many new avenues of disagreements between people and people, citizens and states, and now we are in a globalized situation. So we have so many issues about whether we should open up our doors for global capital resources, human resources to walk into our country. With all these unforeseen issues confronting the country, I don't think we can have any blueprint which will satisfy all these questions. But I must assure you that the government is very closely paying attention to it. So we have segments of a society whose justice needs are very different. A remote women and men living in, say, in a forest area, women and men living in rural areas, what are their justice needs? It is not justice needs of like you and me.
Yes.
So the justice needs of people in commerce and trade, people in other walks of life, people who are aspiring to get a minimum employment opportunity. So justice needs are very, very, very different. So therefore, in this context, how do we conceive of new justice dispensation? I also think that in this context, it is not merely the job of the executive. It's a role and the participation of the entire nation, including particularly educational institutions, which can make a wholesome contribution to saying how we can deal with this problem. But more importantly, we have for long gone ahead with an adversarial system, right? Like the fight which goes on in the courts. Who wins? It depends on a large number of factors. So again, if you analyze what happens in a Supreme Court or a High Court or an ordinary civil or a criminal court, the scene is very, very different. So when you talk about access to justice, well, yes, India has done extremely well in saying the ability to make people reach courts, they're competent to reach courts, has been facilitated in huge ways in terms of legal aid, legal assistance, expanding the scope of legal assistance, etc. But that's not the end of the story. So when you talk of pendency, please let us analyze pendency of different sections of the community's intricate problems. So commercial pendency, criminal pendency, other pendency, then you get a real good answer.
Yeah.
I suppose we need to also ask a question which will be differently asked. I can give a different answer.
Yes. No, thank you so much, sir. And you were very candid in recognizing the challenge. One aspect that I want to kind of push your boundaries a bit is that, sir, we also know that more than 50% of the cases, the government happens to be a litigant. Now, from your vantage standpoint as Attorney General and as somebody who works closely with the government, can we seek some reforms in that particular segment where appeals that are automatically preferred on matters that come at every stage of at the lowest stage all the way to the highest stage, can there be some sort of innovation reforms where there should be some limits on appeals, especially when the government is one of the litigant? Because one of the larger fears I have is that this clogging of the system potentially will not only affect the efficiency of the court, but you also run the risk of not able to pay attention to the more important matters when there are so many matters out there for the judges to adjudicate.
I think I would like to look at it slightly differently. So 100 people walking into a court one fine morning, and 10 of them get good results and quickly, right? Which means the results which 10 people get will probably cover the problems of another 80 people. So the other 20 people may have to wait for other reasons, structural reasons. Whatever institutional changes you may bring about, creating more courts, they will certainly invite more and more issues. The trust, issue I've seen in the past 15, 20 years, more and more tribunals have been created. And look at the volume of work which flows into these tribunals. Is it because that the ability of this newly created institution is more assuring? Yes. So therefore, I think every time you open a channel, there'll be like open tributaries from River Ganges. You open up tributaries, channels, I think they keep flowing in as many places as possible, like water will find its way. So therefore, I think it's going to be a theory. We can't answer it on theoretical basis. But what I would probably suggest is, let us have a more structured analysis of this problem, instead of talking out at a rhetorical basis. But more closely, I think we're also moving towards what's called an environment of mediation.
Yeah.
Right? We've enacted a mediation law, and around the world, the principles of mediation in trying to be the most effective dispute resolution procedure has caught up very hugely. And except that we have lagged a little behind. The other countries have picked up speed on that. Singapore has picked up very high speed. But I think, given my understanding what the government would like to do, there are reforms that are being pushed very, very, very hard and quickly. And I'm sure before we talk of Viksit Bharat, we would have seen some other Bharat, where all these issues would have been answered.
Well, thank you so much. And I think thank you for dealing with this matter at length, because I know that there are lots of reform initiatives that the government is pursuing, and some of those things will have a gestation period to be actually reflected. One more aspect of this particular judicial challenge is about appointment of judges. I know that you are deeply seized of the matter. When those of us who are not working in the government, when we read newspapers, we hear that there are some 30 to 40% of judges, vacancies are lying, and there is a process that is taking time. Regardless of the quality of the appointments and the sort of powers that be involved in the appointment, my question to you is more on the procedural side, especially with regard to speed and efficacy. At one level, we are dealing with this challenge that we talked about. Do you think that we need to figure out a much more faster manner by which judicial appointments can be made, so that even before vacancies arise, the process is in place and the person is in place, so that we can have a smooth and more effective appointment process, not just the Supreme Court, because that's a very small group of judges, but also high courts as well?
See, what is seen and visible is what's reported in newspapers about the time taken in making appointments. The newspaper story is probably 1/100th of the truth. There is enough speed. There's good speed. All possible attempts are being made to expedite the appointment processes. But then what is not seen more often is how many of us in the profession who make a good life by the time we reach 40, 45 are inclined to sacrifice for the sake of becoming a part of an institution. The answer is a big no. The problem lies there today. Then judges at the highest court and government have probably involved in a very meaningful way as to find answers to this question. in the past 3 years when I have come across many, many instances when uh, the unwillingness of people to get into, to offer, get judgeship. So you see the reluctance. Therefore, the profession is also now moving into very profitable areas where by 40, I am well placed. I'm a crorepati, right? So why should I become a judge earning 1 lakh rupee per month? Why should I take over all the responsibilities, spending sleepless nights and doing what's called this thankless job called doing justice? So that's a real problem. So if only we can say that a kind of a visionary commitment can come into our law schools and younger generation of lawyers coming into the profession, that I need to serve the country too. Of course, government will have to be more what called promising a better position as a say in the High Court and Supreme Court, financially and other securities. But at the same time, you will see the Supreme Court taking care of the lower judiciary by doing as many things as possible to make their life comfortable. All financial aspects of the higher judiciary are taken care of with the Supreme Court. So we have nothing left, unattended. But still, if you have this problem, it is not, I think, the lack of speed. So the lack of speed is compounded by all these factors. I don't know how we are going to ensure that greater speed alone will probably bring a solution. Of course, there are areas where greater speed is possible. But I think we must know more and more about what's happening.
Thank you so much, sir. I think the point about the appointment of judges is something that you have very nicely handled, because many times whatever information that comes in the public domain is either not true or half truths, and most of us may not fully understand. Before I get into a session with our audience, I want to ask you a question that increasingly is becoming a global trend. 2 weeks ago, I was speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos on the role of artificial intelligence and its relationship to the future. And I know that this is going to become dominant, and it has already become, but to my surprise, the kind of extraordinary degree of acceptance and embracing of AI on so many aspects of our life, including governance around the world, was something, a revelation for me personally. So my question to you is that, to what extent we are preparing our legal system, our legal institutions, our judiciary including, to be able to not only recognize the role of AI, but also to respond to the challenges that AI will pose, and to recognize issues related to ethics and compliance and privacy on the one hand, and how we can use it for improving efficiency and efficacy when it comes to justice delivery itself.
I know where the question comes from. It comes from your heart. And because you have now set up a course on artificial intelligence as part of your Bachelor of Arts. And I should tell you that artificial intelligence is virtually pervasive in our Supreme Court and High Court today. It is there. But in what manner, to what extent, it's going to occupy an important role in ensuring speedy and effective justice is a different question to be answered. I think the higher judicial institutions in our country are fully involved and engaged, both institutionally and judges at the individual level. They are asking questions, trying to find answers, and to advance the frontiers of our engagement in ensuring all this, what call the new technology explosion. And we have somehow got used to artificial intelligence as a phrase, and I suppose we probably will invent our own Indian phrase for it, maybe in some point of time. Then what we are probably looking at, this evolving technology which some authors call the new machine age, a new machine age beyond our recognition. How do we transform it for useful, beneficial, and socially exploitable purposes? So on the one hand, today, big techno companies can sell artificial intelligence purely for commercial reasons. Now then we become a tool in their hand. But if suppose India is able to steer clear all these so-called the capital markets involved in artificial intelligence, then we would have converted into our own student. So I'm thinking of an area in a period when India would have been able to conquer both the financial, economic, and global giant domination in the artificial intelligence scene, and then able to understand why and why it can't be used differently. So, well, it's all right to say in games like chess, you have all those instances when somebody can master a chess game and defeat somebody, a human being. But we are looking at, if I'm looking at somebody in hunger, looking for an employment opportunity, or looking for a way of dealing certain very intricate problem in life in a remote part of a country, what can artificial intelligence do for them? I'm not looking at the robotics playing a big game and a big role in the elite part of a country. They can do many things. You can have Star Wars happening around us, but I don't think I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at if we have made a spade useful for our ordinary, walks of life, how do we make an artificial intelligence to be so useful in the same sense? That's going to be the challenge.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think it's so much in line with the fact that we need to look at, if you have to recognize justice as a public good, we need to be conscious of the fact that how we can't afford to have technologies only from the standpoint of the commercial and corporate interest that motivates the development of these new technologies, but how we can align with these technologies for our commitment to achieving justice as well as public service. Now, before we go to the questions, I've been told by the organizers to provoke you with some more personal and questions that we can get to know the man behind the law. In many ways, we all know the Attorney General as a distinguished scholar, a researcher, a speaker, and a lawyer. So my first question is, what is it that you do for fun? Now, don't tell me that going to the Supreme Court and appearing before the judges is a lot of fun. But I want to ask you, beyond that, what is it that you do for fun?
This is the first time I'm sitting before a public audience like this. Right? I have never been to a visual media, not even a TV show.
Yes.
And the big fight which goes on in the visual media.
Yes.
My life has been very personal.
Correct.
I've never promoted myself by going to, the 27/4 and see myself on the screen. But what do I do for fun? I think I'll try to find an answer tomorrow.
I'm not surprised, but yeah.
But sometimes what I do by fun is, I have a very select set of chambermaids, my juniors.
Uh-huh.
So, and as Mrs. Venkataramani says very often, that the only time we sit together is at a dinner table and try to know each other for the day, right? So the rest of the time is spent in the work. During lunch hours in the court in our chamber, I chat with my chambermaids, laugh with them, right? Make them laugh with me, look at the most funniest part of things in life, and make the most serious parts of life more humorous. And I think that's where I have little fun.
That's pretty good. I mean, that's a very good one.
Yes.
Now, of course, some people may or may not know, but we all know that you are an outstanding poet. And in many ways, this is not the usual thing that lawyers do. Lawyers are used to prose and arguments and persuasion and skills and all of that. But this poetic side of Venkataramani, how did it begin? And how do you kind of, because most of your day job is steeped in reality. You are dealing with injustices, violation of rights, upholding of rights, defending of the government, all of that. And then suddenly, where do you and how do you transport yourself into another world where you begin to write this inspiring poetry?
Again, on the lighter side, right? If today this event was organized for selling my book of poetry, I would have loved it.
Yes.
I would have allowed an audience saying, look here is a book which you must buy.
Yes.
But your question is not, asking me to do that. There are a lot of things which has gone into shaping up it. As if one day I write about how one gathers experiences in life and convert them into a different vision. I think every creative mind has this potential. Like a painter with a brush, how does the mind connect with a brush and how does it cancellate it through hand and brush is a very difficult question to answer. So the creative activity of human mind is something extraordinary. But then experience gather and you try to reflect on it, what the mind does with it is something uh, deeply worth exploring for every one of us. Probably I keep telling myself that at the end of the day, that if you had an experience today, what do you make out of that? You let it sink in your mind, the mind does the job, the rest of the job. So I had a couple of very deeply provoking experiences. When I was a student of law, we had a friend of mine who did a small wrong. The police picked him up and put him in the police station. We had a very noble head of our institution, Professor Madhav Menon. So I was told about this person being picked up in the police station. So like, at a young age, you rush to the police station and ask, why are you doing this? So I told our principal that this is how my friend has been taken to the police station. He said, go slow, but I'll come there. So I went there, waiting for the inspector to come. So as soon as the inspector came, he did not even bother to ask, why did you do this? He just gave him a big slap. I still remember that. Why did he not wait to ask a question? What makes a man to do this? I began to think there is something in our mind, every one of our mind, when we are caught in certain situation, either holding a position of power or anything where we need to express ourselves the way the office dictates you to do that. We forget that we are ultimately human beings accountable to our deeds. These thoughts always troubled me. And how do you convert it into a piece of sharing with somebody? How do you change yourself from being an animal into a holy person? And then much later, when I went to spend some time with a very noble social reformer and a social worker called Baba Amte, I spent my time in the ashram, and before I left the ashram, he told me, look here, I'm trying to grow rose plants, and so that they will not have thorns in the rose plant. I asked him why. These leprosy patients for whom I'm serving, I wish they can pick up these roses without being pricked by the thorns in the plants. What a noble thought. I mean, how many of us think about it? And that came ultimately with the title of my book.
Book, yes, of course.
So, roses without thorns. We all carry thorns in our minds. We all carry thorns in our everyday life, for good or bad reason. But can you not aspire to grow roses without thorns? So how do you convey this idea to somebody else? So conveying an idea then gets transformed into a different form. So the transformation into different form probably what makes poetry. So the other day, 3 days ago, I was at a little free time in the morning and watching the birds and the peacock running around our house, thinking, why not that every one of us have a time free for ourselves beyond our everyday, challenges, and look whatever I'm doing for the rest of the world and to the rest of the community, and to own myself by being in peace. Today morning, just to connect it, something totally unconnected, our country has thought about all of this. Our literature, Tamil, English, Tamil, Hindi, Marathi, take any language, Sanskrit, any language. They've all thought about it. How do we, ensure that the nobility in each and every one of us comes alive? So the need that every one of us feels about it. They need to feel about it. And that, I think that's what literature is all about. So each and every one of us have that elements of nobility, but sometimes we clog them. We put them somewhere in a closet. We don't have opportunities to express themselves as freely as possible. Then we find that we are lost. So between poetry and justice, there is a close connection.
Thank you so much for those beautiful thoughts. In fact, the fact that you were able to, define your identity as somebody who is deeply embedded both in the world of law and justice and in the world of poetry and thoughts probably gives you that both the sanity and the inspiration to do what you're doing. In some ways, we were very fortunate in our country because some of the leaders of the freedom movement happen to be lawyers. And when I look at Mr. Venkataramani and his own identity as a lawyer, as a jurist, I can't help but recognize the fact that the leading figures of our freedom movement who essentially fought the freedom, laid the foundations of our democracy, all the way from Mahatma Gandhi, Sardar Patel, Nehru, Rajendra Prasad, Ambedkar, all these individuals shaped the foundations of India, and they've all happened to be lawyers. In many ways, lawyers and individuals who have been trained in law laid the foundations of our republic, and today we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of it. So when I hear Mr. Venkataramani's reflections, it gives us hope for the future of India, hope for the future of law and justice. Now we have another 15 minutes before we wind up at 6 o'clock. So I'm going to throw this open for a discussion. So I'm requesting you to the audience, somebody will probably take a mic and give it to you. Short questions, not a speech, but a short question. We'll collect a few questions and I will request our distinguished Attorney General to respond.
Good evening, august personalities. My name is Ritikesh, and my question to you is that since we are into amalgamation of diversity, so how can judiciary ensure the diversity and fair representations of the marginalized in our communities?
Got it.
Thank you.
Great. Sir, you would like to answer these three and then we can go for next round if you have time.
I don't think the responsible and effective way of dealing with all the concerns of the different sections of community will be to create more and more courts. Probably I would visualize other alternative institutions where the adversarial element is completely taken off. We had established fast-track courts at some point of time to meet arrears. It worked, but it has not worked. So I think we must move slowly away from what I call the adversarial, deeply entrenched adversarial element in our dispute resolution process. That by itself, I think, will produce a lot of speed and effectiveness. So I would probably visualize different kind of institutions when the health concerns and needs are taken care of by differently framed participatory institutions. I would look at it like that. Now, as far as diversity is concerned, I'll come back to your question. Not that it's a very difficult question to answer, but not that I'm wanting to. The diversity, in fact, has been taken care of by Supreme Court in most profound sense. It has not kept away any particular individual or section of the community and from answering the questions. You look at the history of the court in the past decade, look at a wide range of issues which have come. Way back in 1950, a person who was a butcher came to the Supreme Court. My right to, freedom of trade and expression, and also right to carry on trade. The Supreme Court answered it as reasonably as possible. A woman who was, flesh trade, came to the Supreme Court after going to the High Court. The Supreme Court answered that question. So we have, like that, a large number of people belong to different diverse sections of a community. Not only in terms of religion and faith, but in terms of occupations, employment, and language. Not one subject under the Constitution, not one subject which is of concern to our country have not been dealt with by the Supreme Court or the High Court so far. Walk into the High Courts and Supreme Court, you will find it's as if it's a mirror unto the daily life of our people. It's a real mirror. Therefore, I don't think the courts have been away from the diversity factor. But unfortunately, even beyond the so-called live streaming of what's happening in the courts, which only captures lawyers like us want to be a little goody-goody, right? Beyond that, the live streaming does not really tell you the diversity factor which is so apparent, which is so deeply involved in our ability to do justice to our common women and men. You take any number of cases. I think if I probably to answer a question, tomorrow I'll ask my juniors to prepare a 200-page note and get it published. You will find it's, amazing. It's amazing. To answer your question, sir. I think we are in an evolving society. In the sense that with all our more than 5,000 years of history, where seeking truth, what is truth for me, good for me as an individual, and what is true for the rest of the community. Seeking truth has been the most fundamental value of our life. We had 4 clashes of faiths. And then the need to go beyond intolerance has become part of our psyche today. That there is intolerance in our life is one aspect of the matter. But then the mere fact that intolerance also tells us that unlike we go the rest of the world route, we must build our own routes and paths. And is it possible only through the political process? Yes, partly true. But it must go beyond the political process. The political process also, I would put it like this, is tamed, like taming a shrew, is tamed by the courts. We need the courts to tell the government and the political process, be careful. If you are not careful, then it is not that you are committing a wrong for yourself or the political party, but you are committing a wrong for the nation. So being careful is the watchword which the courts hand over to the institutions. Therefore, let us not look at the confrontation and how the ability, the maturity of the courts to handle this, and it's not an easy task. It's not an easy task at all. Like you play kabaddi, how do you manage your not crossing that line? It's a very subtle way. You're maneuvering, all that. So the judges are also are mature enough to handle that. Sometimes, of course, I talk about my own personal view of life and things like that and try to bring it into the judicial process. Just as an elected member would like to bring their understanding of life into the political process. Nothing wrong about it. If I think today our Prime Minister would think that I would like to look at our country after 25 years like this, well, I think he's called upon to think like that. So also every one of us as individuals. So the institutions of judiciary also behave like that. So if a Chief Justice of India thinks that I must transform the institution of justice in radical ways, it is task and its mandate. So the task and mandates on the one hand, but how we perceive and able to manage all the tensions in doing that is a great thing. Only when you sit on the chair, when you sit on a particular chair, you know how difficult it is to do a particular task. So on the other hand, political ideologies are also equally important for us. But ultimately for me as a student of law and a student of life, I think for a nation like ours, which is the best way of finding a truth about a particular aspect of life? Can you say socialism is the final model? Can you say capitalism is the final model which will answer all the questions? So we have no such what called textbook answers to these questions. Like every part of humanity moving towards their own answers in different ways. So I would like to look at it like this, that only by a sharing process where each and every one of us share our ideas, our concerns, our ability to transcend our own limitation, when we share them, I think our nation will be able to rise to a higher level. This is what probably Rabindranath Tagore said, the narrow domestic walls of a country. So the narrow domestic walls are breaking slowly and slowly. They will break. But if we don't have a dream, I think then we are not going to do what we want to do. So all our constitutional talks are all about dreams which each and every one of us should have. And when I talk to students, I say dream not only about your future profession, but a dream about your own country. Dream about how you make part of a global citizen, when it will make the world better. So that dreaming. And I think sure every judge, I tell you, more or less to the extent I met with a lot of ministers and parliamentarians, many of them do have their dreams. Do not forget that they are also responsible people. Some may have their own ways of living life. Do not count them as the majority of our community. there are a large number of responsible people in political life who know why they need to do what they need to do. But of course, our newspapers will have a different stories. That if I argued something yesterday in the court, what will be reported in the court is not what probably I argued, but the question put to me by the court. That question will become the headline, right? So, but what I argued may not become the headline. So, the dreams, the visions, and the everyday toils which people in public life carry with them will never be seen in public life. Then, if you have to see them, then reams and reams of volumes and volumes of papers will have to be written. We'll get bored with them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Venkataramani, for that fascinating set of reflections. I'm afraid we are running out of time now because we've had a wonderful discussion. I'm conscious of the fact that what Mr. Venkataramani said in relation to the final round of questions and reflections, that he talked about the strength and resilience of the institution and the people who are involved in it. And I want to take you back to the last speech of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, which he delivered on 25th November 1949. He talked about the fact that we have a fantastic constitution and we worked hard for it. But he said that this constitution that we have for us will fail if the people who are involved in implementing the constitution are not good. And conversely, he said, even if there was not a good constitution, if the people who are going to be exercising power were good people, then the constitution will succeed. In many ways, today what we heard from Mr. Venkataramani was the role of those individuals, be it the judges of the courts, be it the parliamentarians, be it the people who are working as executive officials. Their role is so critical as we look at the future of our constitution and our democracy. I want to conclude by saying that this court, the Supreme Court that we are discussing for the last an hour or so, is celebrated its 75th anniversary, and it has provided extraordinary hope for the millions of people in India who were seeking justice. But like all institutions, we ought to be self-critical and evaluative about its functioning, and that is why it's important as we look at the future, it needs to do more towards building those pillars of justice and fulfilling the aspirations of the people. Thank you very much, sir, for your time and reflections. Before we wind up, I would love to have your closing comments on the theme Supreme Court at 75, Pillar of Justice and Mirror of Aspirations.
Firstly, I think thank the organizers for calling me here today evening. It looks like that it's a different kind of a classroom which is assembled here, but of course I would not call it a classroom. When I say it resembles like it, and your questions, you are a very powerful thinker, you are heading a very leading, globally recognized institution, and your questions are not only purely reflective, but they also provocative, I know that. But both of us sitting together, probably after I would have debated my office, whatever time is going to take. And if I pen my thoughts, I think the next book will be written in the literary festival today. What can minds do by being together?
And I hope you will write that book in Sonipat at the campus of OP Jindal
So
Global
what can
University.
minds do by being together? It's like a river flowing perennially without any stop. And I'm so happy to see people whom probably I would never meet again, and except again in some forums like this, if at all that's going to happen, a perchance. But since we are here, I thought you asked me about my poetry, and
Yes. Please.
I can probably wind up with a piece which I wrote during COVID and lockdown.
Yes.
During lockdown, when you looked at all of us being locked in the narrow spaces of our houses, and your ability to go beyond, at least mentally, to look at the rest of the world, and our own nation struggling to find answers to so many questions and challenges, particularly the health question, having a new vaccine. So I wrote this piece. I know what sense it will make, but let me read it. I've read it on many occasions earlier, but I thought this is one piece I should share in a public forum like this. O nation brave and beautiful, in thoughts profound and resolves sound, in deeds quick and actions swift, in the chorus of our unity, let us ride. O nation brave and blissful, reel till your hearts feel, dump all the garbages of your minds in petty cages locked. Did not the Lord in Gita say, someone who does my work, those who lay down their works in me, exalting me, with malice towards none, comes to me? O nation brave and bountiful, let each of us in giant resolve be a Noah, the biblical Noah, be a Noah of modern times, be arks of great fiber and space. O nation brave and benevolent, what greater temples can you build for Lord Ram of reverence deep than the sharing of your lofty cares for the weak and the infirm, the distressed and the disabled, the poor and the distraught? Let compassion light all corners of your mind and heart. O nation brave and buoyant, in solitude you learn, in isolation you learn, in chains drawn on all motions you learn, all lives are one, and learn to play new patterns of life.
Thank you so much. What an inspiration and what an extraordinary way to conclude the session. Thank you very much to the World Book Fair as well as the Bharat Literature Festival and Dipali and her entire team for putting this together. Thank you, sir.